right. So, do you want to just introduce yourself and then just talk a little bit about how you began your college career and then where did you actually end up?
Yeah, so hello, my name is Emily Hernandez Alzamora. I'm currently a senior at the University of Utah. Before I transferred to the University of Utah, I had started at Salt Lake Community College, mainly because of financial reasons. They had offered me a full scholarship, which for
Mhm.
me was super important just because I didn't have a full ride scholarship and I didn't know how to pay for college. And so I was like, perfect, we're going to start right there. But my full goal was to transfer to the University of Utah. And so for me, it was, I knew where I wanted to go. And so I specifically geared all my questions and the people that I met with at SLIC to make sure I had
Mm,
everything I needed to go to the U. So all my classes I knew transferred over. The major that I wanted to pursue was spot on, that I asked who I needed to talk to in terms of like making sure everything is still okay, doing check-ins, things like that. And then when I got to the University of Utah, I decided to major in management and
mm,
information systems. So for me, because of a couple of experiences that I've had, I really enjoyed management, and that's something that I decided to pursue actually on a whim, mainly because I originally thought I wanted to go to law school, but
mm.
things changed. And so in high school, I did an internship at a business law firm. And from there, I learned that I loved business. I was still pretty good with law, but I was like, I don't know if I still want to do it, but I was like, business is for me. So I decided to major in business because you needed a bachelor's degree to go to law
Sure.
school. And so I was like, perfect, let's go do that. And then I was like, okay, well then if I want to go to the University of Utah's law school, why not do the business school at the U? Super competitive, it's nice, it's helpful. And so I worked my way of like, hey, I'm gonna after SLIC, I'm going to the U. The business school was great. And then after a while, I was like, okay, management is my niche. Like I love working with people, I love talking with people. It was super nice. And then after a while, I realized I didn't want to go to law school. And so for me, the decision there to be like, okay, well then what am I gonna do? And
Mhm.
I talked to a couple professors and they were like, well, what about higher education? And I was like, ha ha ha. And it wasn't like a bad thing for me because I love
Sure.
higher ed. And through my whole college career, I guess you could say, I worked as a student ambassador, I worked as a student body president, I worked at the president's office at the University of Utah. Um, I've done so many things. I work in the transfer office. And so for me, like, I didn't see higher education as a career. I just more saw it as
Mm,
something that I enjoyed, something that I liked.
right.
And so
Sure.
it was like a whole nuance thing. And then after I got into the idea of it, my professor was like, hey, let's get you on research. Let's see what opportunities are for you, available for you. And so that kind of shifted the narrative of like, okay, well, I'm no longer doing anything related to law school. I'm not taking the LSAT. I'm not
Mm,
thinking about what law school I want to go to or what's happening after. So now what do I have to do for a PhD? And so that kind of changed from I'm meeting with my business professors to actually do a PhD in hopefully in organizational behavior. And so
mm,
it's kind of been like a big transition, but I feel like
sure.
my experience from transferring from SLIC to the U and then being like, okay, now I'm changing from a bachelor's degree to a PhD. Like that's a completely different thing. But I feel like
Right.
the transfer process of like, oh, you ask questions, you get nuanced a whole new experience. You're like thrown into the river and you're just like tumbling down, tumbling
Yeah.
down. And so for me, it's been like a similar process of like you're just transferring to new stages of life.
Right. Right. And so, just to be clear, SLIC is Salt Lake
Oh yeah,
Community
sorry.
College?
Salt Lake
Okay, you're
Community
all
College.
good. Yeah,
It's the
that's
local
a
community
fun,
college for the state of Utah.
yeah, that's a really fun acronym because usually we're like, okay, all these letters, so you guys actually have something fun to say. So that's that's an amazing story. I think there's probably a lot of transfer students that could relate to your experience. you made a lot of really great statements in terms of what helped influence you to transfer to the U, and then some things that happened afterwards. But when you were at Slick and you were making those decisions, was there anything that maybe came up in that process that you weren't anticipating? So anything that would prepare you for that navigation between, a community college to a university? Was there anything that might have been frustrating in that process? Do you want to elaborate just a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think for me, when I had these conversations, I honestly lucked out. I had an incredible advisor when I worked as a student ambassador. And so
Mm.
she told me, she's like, this is the person you want to talk to if you want to go to the business school at the U. And they happened to be a computer science advisor. So completely far
Oh,
away from the business realm. They
yeah,
weren't even a business advisor, they were computer science. And then they also introduced me to someone like career services who used to work there, and they also helped me find like the internships and like
yeah,
contacted me people for scholarships at the U. I think the difficulty was I tried my best to plan out as much as I can. I started like a year in advance. I
wow,
was like, I already knew where I wanted to go. And so my whole, from the beginning when I started at Slick, I was trying to make sure that everything transferred over as smoothly as possible. And so because of the pandemic and everything, I think there was a lot of stuff where um like there are a lot of like family circumstances and there's a lot of like mental health circumstances where like
sure,
my grades started to slip. And so that was a really difficult thing when I transferred over to convince the admissions specifically in the business school to let me in. I was like, hey, like I know I can do it. There's just a lot of things that I had experienced that had me slip my grades, and I still want to be pursuing business. I just didn't have the pathway to get there. And so
yeah,
for me, the struggle was like that transition process where I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm getting in because I worked so hard to get in. And so
right,
it's just making sure like the conversations that I had at Slick were just as valuable as the one that I was having at the U. And I think for me, that was such a disconnect because the experiences that you have, it's like at Slick, or it's not like community college. They are so, um, it's so close-knit community. It's smaller
mm,
versus a
right,
four-year institution. Their advisors are working with like 1 to 1,000+ students. And so maybe I'm not going to have that close-knit community that I had from my community college to the University of Utah. And so for me, having that disconnect was a little difficult. So it's just like
sure.
that process of like physically changing my like information, my transcripts. It's like that middle piece, but the planning, I try to do it as best as I could.
Mm-hmm. And with that planning, what did you have anything that popped up that you weren't expecting?
Um, I think for me, what was surprising, and I genuinely appreciated it because, now I get to graduate this spring because of it.
Great, that's
And
awesome.
so, for me was the ability that like you can still, even if there are setbacks into what you want to do, what you pursue, I feel like that doesn't necessarily stop you from doing what you want to do. And
Sure,
so when I'm telling the admissions board, like, hey, I really want to do this. I think I belong here. I want to pursue this degree because of these reasons. They were
right,
able to be like, hey, here's some set circumstances where if you fulfill these requirements, you're able to be fully admitted. So I think like giving yourself the opportunity to like, if you want it, you can do it. And like
right,
asking those questions and being like, hey, like I know right now, but is there a way that I can do it? Like for me, they said, if you take these 4 classes and ended up with a specific GPA, you're going to be fully admitted to the business school. And for me, I didn't know that because again, it's not widely talked. It was circumstantial. And so I was able to
gotcha.
ask about it. So I think there's certain underlying things where like the web page of a specific university can only tell you so much. But when you
Yes,
ask questions, that's where you can find the little loopholes to get to where you want to go. So I feel like for myself, being a transfer student is like that entrepreneur experience where you're creating your own pathway instead of relying on the traditional pathways that higher education provides us.
yeah. That's interesting you bring it up because I would um every big institution is going to have something that you may not know until you've actually talked to somebody. So I like hearing that like that experience for sure. I think let's take a little bit step back to where, because I know you were very you had a mindset, right, in your transfer experience and choosing the institution and getting, deciding on your major. What made you choose to go to the U? Other than, I know you had mentioned some things about financial. Was that the biggest contributor to it, or were there other reasons why you chose?
So just kind of thinking of like the overlying map of Utah, I think there's a couple like there's Utah Valley University, Brigham Young University that
Mm-hmm.
do, I believe, oh my goodness, I'm like spacing out. I know so many acronyms, but I forgot. Um,
Okay.
there's other universities that have business programs, and I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, realistically speaking, like I'm completely reliant on scholarships and the jobs that I work at.
Okay.
And so for me, I like I can't afford the University of Utah's tuition, ironically.
Sure.
And so for me, I worked so much. Like I worked 3, 4 jobs at Solid Community College so I can save up for the University of
I
Utah.
gotcha.
That was all spent from 2 years that I worked at, all spent in one semester.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
now I've been at the U for about 3 years, not quite yet. Well, 3 academic years, I should clarify. And that means no summer. So at Solid Community College, I did summer, but at the University of Utah, I didn't do any summers. I heavily relied on scholarships. And so for scholarships, it really is a manhunt for finding any
Mm-hmm.
scholarships to cover those. And
Right.
so um, me choosing University of Utah was intentional because originally I thought I wanted to go to law school. And so I wanted
Sure.
to go to the most competitive program. I wanted to have the most resources available to me. Even if it costed more, I wanted to do that. And so
Right.
Utah, like all these other programs that Utah offers may be great, may be wonderful, but I wanted to be in the community that I specifically wanted to be in. And so University of Utah provided me with a lot more resources than other
Gotcha.
universities could have provided me with. And so I was willing to make the sacrifices of like working multiple jobs, applying to multiple scholarships, just so I can get into the University of Utah to afford tuition. So that way to make sure like my goals are being reached.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes, right, like I think there's a misconception that students are going to make certain decisions based off of like one factor. And it's nice to hear that you really considered all of everything, right? From like the financial, the community, all of that to really make this decision. And it probably is what, in your introduction where you talked about kind of your journey now at the U, is probably what helps support a lot of that, right? Would you say, as being a transfer student, um, is there anything you want to highlight that's like some of the best things about being a transfer student? And then maybe also highlight what are some things that just, yeah, make it a little more
Like
challenging?
we hear about this like transfer shock, and that for me, like, like we talk about it, but we don't really know about it until you
Sure.
experience it yourself. And so for me, it was actually a huge shock where like I cried on the first day of classes,
Oh
just
gosh.
because for me, like I was like, holy crap, like this institution is so big, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
in a community college, like it's just like a 3, 4 minute walk between like buildings. At the University of
Hmm.
Utah, it'll take me like 7 minutes to get to where I want to go.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
depending on where you want to go, especially when you're going up a mountain and you're not going flat, like it's
Oh.
even longer. And so for
Hmm.
me, like there was a lot of students, the buildings are bigger, there's a lot more resources, there's a lot more people coming at you. The
Yeah.
classes are 100 plus, whereas a community college, like I'm used to being in classes that are like 35 people and less. And for me, the also shock, it wasn't just like the physicality of the institution. It was
Sure.
also like my education, like that completely changed, where the dynamic at a community college, I felt like I was challenged a lot. My coursework was
Mm-hmm.
so intentional, it was harder. And then when I got to the University of Utah, like it wasn't that hard. Like I wasn't as challenged as I was at Salt Lake Community College. Like, you know, the
Interesting.
different aspects of like how much busy work we're given versus intentional work, how many discussions we get to have. I feel like those are all different dynamics that some people don't really realize of, like, you know, your life at Salt Lake Community College. When I talk to people at my local community college, I'm like, hey, keep in mind when you're coming in here that tuition is going to be more, it's going to be doubled.
Right.
It's going to be, your classes are going to be a lot larger until you're more specified. So until you're taking like high level 4,000 to 5,000 level courses, you're not going to get one-on-one
Right.
connection with your professor. And if you need that, you need to instigate that. And so it's really difficult when, especially people that I like, that I've become good friends with and people that I get to meet, a lot of them have a difficult time approaching professors just because they didn't have to do that approach. The professor did that themselves, but now it's like, okay, if you want something, if you want to get involved, you need to be continually proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the high note, I think for me, it didn't happen right as when I got in, but I think again is because of that planning that I did and
Right.
just a
Right.
sense of luck was that I got to be connected with a peer mentor program. And so I was connected with a transfer student who came from
Wow.
Salt Lake Community College, who's a
Yeah.
business student. And they walked me through, they were like, hey, these are the classes you want to take. This is who you want to
That's
talk
awesome.
to. This is where you go to pay tuition. Like all of those things. It sounds like, oh, you're just like, it's a buddy system. I'm like, but as a transfer student, it's so nice to have a buddy system. Like
That's so
when you
nice.
have someone who's used to it, it's so great because even when you talk to like juniors or freshmen who started from day one at the university, is a completely conversation because they're looking at you like, what are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they're like, oh, are you a freshman? I'm like, I'm new, but I'm not a freshman. I'm a junior.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
wait, how does that? And I was like, I started a local community college, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, community college? Like,
Mm.
and so again, there's like so much stigma around being a community college student, and then there's a stigma of not starting, so you don't have any friends when you come in. And so, but through that time, we were able to develop our transfer student success center. And so
Okay.
it's been really nice where Paul, who's my current advisor,
Yeah.
he followed me, actually helped me at Salt Lake Community College. He helped me understand what's the transfer process, what do I need to like look forward to, signing up for orientation as early as I can to make sure I get the classes that I need. And then he was the program manager over for the peer mentor group. And then like, as I've been transitioning, he's been transitioning with me. And
Oh,
so he
that's
asked me, he's
awesome.
like, Emily, do you want to be our transfer like student leader? And I was like, of course. And so for me, like, even though my narrative was like a rocky start, I feel like the best
Sure.
part for me was I was able to change that for other people at the university, especially now that we have like transfer orientation, that we like talk to them. We're like, hey, this is what's available for you. This is what's specifically for your needs. This is how your credits transfer over. And it's so nice to be able to talk to someone who's so specialized in transfer
Right.
students. And even though it's just like myself, Paul, my advisor, and then we also have like a couple of other people in our team, it's nice. Like we have such a small team, but we're still able so different that we can cater to different people's needs. And so for
Mm.
me, it's that change of like, I had a rocky beginning, but then I was
Sure.
able to like enjoy the process of being a transfer student because now I can help other transfer students. And so
Yeah,
it's been
that's
like a
awesome.
change for me where I can see people like, hey, like I'm struggling, I don't know what to do. I'm like, I've got you. Like you don't have to be
Yeah.
alone, like we're here for you. And so that's been really nice for me.
Yeah. It's it's interesting you kind of, because I would say maybe some people um that almost sometimes could feel like an extra burden, especially as you're trying to, navigate this world of going from, a community college to a university, trying to navigate the new tuition, all this stuff. And you did mention like some of that stuff was a little bit of a rocky start, but for you to see that built you to this positive standpoint is quite an interesting way to look at it, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's something that's very needed, especially for transfer students. So, um, yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I think that is something that's going to be heard and resonated with a lot of other students that have experienced that, and it'll just continue to help create a better process overall for transfer students. But one, you now that you're in a place where you're kind of giving back in a sense, and you're able to help support other transfer students so that they don't end up in the same, hopefully not in the same situation that you were in. It's a little bit more positive, a little better than where you were at. What is something that you often share or you wish you had known as you were in this transfer process or before you were transferring to the U?
Um, I think for me, the University of Utah, I think one thing that was bit of surprising for me was how much people love transfer students. Like,
Hmm.
we don't really have, like, we didn't have this resource, our transfer office, until October of like 2022. So it's a very
Wow.
new office. It's super
Yeah.
recent. But every time people come and talk to us about like transfer advice or what transfers are like or what their needs are, they're always like, oh my gosh, I love transfer students because they're so responsible. They always
Right.
communicate. They're always responsive in what I need to do. And so I think what's really nice is that like, people really do appreciate, especially faculty members, staff members, when you're super proactive and you're actively like working with them, talking with them, saying like, hey, I need help, I need support, who can I talk to? Because, like as a staff member, like we're limited to just maybe the short interactions that we have with students, but then we have all
Yeah.
this underlying work that we have that not many people see. It's like behind the doors,
Yeah.
difficult. Like, we don't show that kind of side of our things. Like there's a lot of stuff going on, but the interactions that we have with our students, that when we get to talk to them and then they feel welcome, they feel like they can belong here versus like maybe you go somewhere else and maybe they're like, I don't know who to talk to because no one can give me an exact answer. They're
Mm.
sending me all over the place, but they're not telling me what I need to know. I think for me, it's like a lot of people have so many answers, but sometimes you may find the answers in places that you never knew you could find answers before. And
Sure.
so talking to people, reaching out, I think for me, I kind of knew that at Slick, but I didn't know how much of a connection and how important it is when staff members get to become friends with like student success coaches, with
Hmm.
financial aid centers. And so when they talk to them, we can get help from the person we're talking to and they can send us their contact with another person. So like it's not just networking for students to like be
Hmm.
proactive on campus, but also staff members being like connecting with other staff members, connecting with other offices, seeing what their
Right.
resources have, because then there's so much of a community built around how successful a transfer student can be when we work with other people.
Yeah. Hmm. Is there anything, I guess as we kind of wrap up, because you have such a wonderful story that you're sharing, and I think this kind of goes to what you said, why you were so planned and ready to go with your transfer process, because you have this ability to just really be on top of all of it. Is there anything you want to leave us with in terms of, your process, where you see yourself going in the future, all that stuff? Like, is there anything you want to leave us with as we kind of wrap up your journey?
Yeah, I think one thing that I feel like gets left out in the back burner is that we don't take care of ourselves. And in order for like
Mm,
as much as you love the work, or maybe you don't, maybe you could be like, I just need to do this to pay my bills.
sure.
Totally understand that. I
Yep.
think for me, something that's super valuable is how I set my time, how I set my boundaries, how I'm being mindful of myself. Because if I'm my best self, I can do the best work. And I
Right.
know that because of like practice it. I'm like, hey, I can't do this meeting, but if we can reschedule for another time, let's do that because I'm more present. I'm here. And so sometimes like, you know, as like professionals or even as students, if we set boundaries for ourselves, if we be mindful of what our needs are, what we do, we can't say yes to everything. There's only so much
Right.
you can be stretched in, especially for teams who may be smaller, who may
Right.
not have as big as who doesn't have a lot of resources to share between group members to do transfer work. It's like be still considerate of like how much time you're giving of yourself so that way you can
Mhm.
be your best self at all times.
That's awesome. Yeah. Isn't it crazy how much we just like keep doing, and then at the end of the day we have to go, oh yeah, let's take care of ourselves. Let's take that moment. And yeah, I think that that's a wonderful statement to leave everybody with, just across the board, professional, personal, as a student, all those things. Just yeah, take care of yourself.